Welcome back to the Salted Orange Podcast. My name is Matthew,
My name's Luke.
and we are here with episode 5. It's our Christmas special. Merry Christmas Eve, I guess, because this is technically Christmas Eve if you're watching this um, as it's coming out. It's really cool. We appreciate you guys listening, especially today, because I know it's so busy of a time of year that it's can be difficult to get these things in, but we do appreciate you taking the time to listen to us, whether that's on our YouTube channel or on our Spotify. We appreciate you guys connecting with us there. Of course, you can follow us on either of those platforms and also on Twitter to stay connected with us. But yeah, today is Christmas, all about Christmas. Luke, how do you feel about Christmas?
My mom says I'm a humbug sometimes with Christmas. I don't know why. Sometimes I think it's just because I think I don't like how busy it is. That it just makes it stressful.
Yeah,
Especially if like you're in any kind of music field. This is like the crunch time for you. This is
yeah,
like
that's
you got to
true.
get it all laid out and everything.
I mean, honestly,
As my
it's
dad would say, don't talk to me until January.
yeah, yeah. See you next year, kind of that kind of
Mm,
stuff. No, I get it because like having worked in like the pastoral field during the season, it can be a nightmare. Christmas and Easter are the two like really biggest times of the year, and the rest of it's like, okay, well, let's kind of just do a sermon, take care of whatever's coming up throughout the week. But this is like there's always something like every night. Like I've been going to Christmas parties like every other day, or it feels like there's always something going on. Like it's a very busy time of year, and that's actually what we kind of wanted to talk about in our session today. Is do we lose our meaning of Christmas because it's so busy?
well, I would say that Um, I think definitely there can be times that you're losing what Christmas is about if you look at any kind of our media or anything like that. I did a thing recently where we talked about how how our culture has changed the meaning of Christmas, because if you look back at when Christmas started, I mean, they've already said that like um, there's studies that have been shown that Jesus may have not actually been born on the 25th, but that it more goes with the winter solstice and all that stuff. But we still celebrate it on the day for a reason. But a lot of people say that's part of the older culture, and so I would say that like our culture, how we have changed Christmas is like, now you see all these commercials, we got Sprite Cranberry, that's my favorite Sprite, and we got all these things that like are associated with Christmas, like the gifts and the
Mm-hmm.
tree and all that stuff, and that necessarily isn't, we don't talk about Christmas trees in the Bible, so it's just cool to. I mean, it's interesting to see how it's changed, but also I think that that's how it can. Churches can get buried by like the rushing of trying to get presents for people and
Mm-hmm.
the the forgetting of. I mean, you can see in some families they're more worried about if you're gonna have a Christmas Day dinner at someone's house than it is are you going to be at church the week of Christmas, or since it's on a since this Sunday it's on Christmas Eve, some people might be like, oh well, we got to drive to my aunt's house or my grandma's house, and we can't be at church because we got to be at their house on Christmas. We got to open the presents and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it definitely can show that sometimes people are too busy for church. Um,
I, I think that's a general statement, like that sometimes people are just too busy for church, but especially like this season, because we've done all these different kinds of things to get Christian evangelism to allow people who are outside of the Christian culture to come in, which is how Christmas came about and how they decided on dates because they were trying to get people who were not Christian to, okay, well, what holiday do you celebrate that's around this time? It's like, oh yeah, that's just our thing for Jesus coming, that's what. So those kinds of things have happened in the past that causes everything to be the way it is now, where it's the 25th and most people universally recognize the 25th as a holiday. I mean, I get it off, so I understand that it's like a holiday for some people. And you did bring up a really cool point for me about like Christmas and getting to service, because I didn't think about this until recently, but something that we've been talking about in this season, and something that you think about when you're a pastor or in church organization, is like, how many Christmas Eve services do you hold? Like,
Yeah.
if it's a Sunday, do you hold your normal like 9, 10, 11 o'clock service, and then you have like a 5 or and a 10, or like a 5 and a midnight, or a 5 and 11, or like an 11 or a 7, or like
I
what?
always hated the
How many
midnight
sermon?
service.
The midnight service. I feel like
Yeah.
like most people when they're doing Christmas Eve services, they're either doing like a 5 o'clock because they're like, oh, we're gonna do a Christmas dinner, we're gonna do a dinner afterwards, so come for
Mhm.
service, then we'll do dinner. Or they'll do that because it's like, oh, it's still kind of light out, I guess, a little bit, so you might be able to
Mhm.
see to get there and get back, because old people don't want to come out in the dark. And
Yeah.
but you also have the people who are like, oh, let's do like an 11 o'clock, or let's do like an 11:30 or a 12 o'clock, so we
Mhm.
can celebrate going into the day. But for me, it's like that kind of like, if you have plans on Christmas, you know, you can see it already seeping in here. It's like, you have plans on Christmas, you're not going to come to that service
Mhm.
because you're like, oh, I got to be up tomorrow morning at like 2 o'clock to open gifts. Like, I'm not going to service. So I do
I
feel
mean,
like there's that busyness that overshadows and just seeps into what the actual meeting is. And I think it's been doing that since the beginning.
yeah, I mean, I would look at like it's the same thing as if you're going to like so my parents do, and we have sometimes done this when you go on vacation, you if your vacation lasts over a Sunday, you usually go to church. You'll find a church wherever you go. So that way you're still going to church. And so
Right.
that's why I'm like, it's you have to make time for it, even in this busy season. If it means something to you, if you really care, you can make time for it. I mean, cuz there's always going to be a service somewhere at some time.
Mhm.
I saw this one funny video, and it was like, we have 24 services on Sunday, and it was like a joke because, some churches have like 6 services on a Sunday because, they're so big, or any of these mega churches and stuff like that. And I'm like, it's great that they're having all those services because, like, if someone can't come at this time, because I have friends that, like, I used to have to work on Sunday when I worked in like a, like minimum wage job or whatever you would call it. And like, I would make, I would like tell my employer, I was like, if I can't uh, be there on Sunday, I'm gonna be cranky and upset. But I think there is ways for people to go on Christmas, even if you are, having to travel however far you are. And it doesn't have to be your home church. I mean, I think it's always good to visit something else and get some kind of new experience.
Right. Yeah, because like, if you're going to your home church, it's likely that I'm thinking about like how some churches do Christmas decorations, where they do it the same exact way every year, and I'm like, okay, well, I've experienced this, so maybe it's time to do something different where you experience Christmas a different way. And I've
Hmm.
always like seen services kind of be like, oh, we're gonna do a Christmas Eve service, and there's really not a sermon. It's really
No, a
not.
lot of times they're not. Yeah.
But it's like, oh, here's like a candle lighting thing, or here's like, we're gonna talk about the story, and so like there's a story about as part about the shepherds, and then you do a song, and then you do the story of Mary and Joseph, and there's a song, and like you just get everybody into the nativity scene, and
Kind of like what we did in
songs between.
college,
Yeah.
like when we did lessons in carols.
Hmm.
Um, which that's the thing that a lot of churches do. I think that's a really common thing to do on Christmas Eve is do lessons and carols. Um, but I feel like, you're as busy as you want to make yourself look busy. Like, what I mean is, like, you might be busy, but you're not busy, too busy to come to church
Right.
sometimes. you may think you are, but um, sometimes it's just an excuse because you don't want to go. And I always thought, this was my feeling. I was like, why would you ever want to be called like? Because in the church they call them like C and E's, or Christmas or Creasters. So people who only come on Christmas and Easter, or now Thanksgiving's in that too. They've added Thanksgiving to that. But I'm like, why would you ever want to be lumped into that? You know, that group. I was like, because then you're like, you're only coming because your grandma wants you to come.
Mhm.
Because I
You're
mean,
coming in
I
for the
can
wrong
see it.
reason.
Yeah, because I mean, we have a lot of people that like when their grandkids come in and they don't even come to church, and they will bring them to church because they're at their grandparents or whatever it is, which is fine. But you know, if you don't go to church like that, I'm almost like you're only going because of that person. You're not going because you care about being consistent person in church.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of people who aren't. And something that keeps coming into my mind as you're saying all these things is if it's important enough to you, you will make time for it. Like you will
Hmm.
take time out of your day to prioritize something that's important to you. And I don't think that's the issue because the people who are showing up are those people who are like, this is important to me. I want to, I like going to Christmas Eve service because I like hearing this story and it reminds me of, all the things that Jesus will do as he gets to Easter and we go through the Passion. All that stuff is, starts here, and this is where it comes from, and all these prophecies that, all these build-ups, all these waiting time, which is what Lent is. It's a period of waiting. All this waiting is finally
Hmm.
paid off for something, and I think those people are okay to come, but it's the ones that are like, well, you know,
So you just said something about Lent, and that's something I'd like to kind of
ooh,
ask you. Do you think that I mean, I think that we've lost Lent in general,
yes,
like that. We just worry about Christmas. We don't worry about
uh-huh.
the weeks building up to it.
Well, everyone's like,
Because
this is
like,
the
and I
Christmas
mean,
season. It's not.
and
It's
I'm,
Lenten season.
I mean, I'm
Oh, it's
guilty
not.
of it
Yeah, it's
because
yeah.
I'm definitely guilty of it because I
I'm wrong.
preached the other Sunday
It's
and
Advent, not Lent. My bad.
Advent. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's the one I'm
Advent.
talking about.
Well, see,
Advent.
that just shows
Lent
how
is
how
Easter.
like that just shows how bad we are at it. Like, so I was preaching the other day and we were talking about Advent, and I completely had forgotten, all the different candles' meanings. And it was kind of funny because my sermon fit the first Advent candle, anyways. I was like, man, I just got lucky.
Well, it
But
depends on what church you're in because some churches are like hope, joy, peace, love, and some churches are like
yeah,
peace, joy, hope, love, and they change the
well, the
order. I'm
one
like,
I was in, it was hope, and my
yeah,
sermon fit with hope, so I was happy that it actually fit. But I really do feel like Advent's gone. Like, uh, when I was a kid, we did Advent reads, like you made your own, and you had candles and all that stuff. And like churches don't do that anymore.
hmm
I mean, I guess I haven't. I would say I'm uneducated in that though because I haven't went to like the newer churches, like the what you would call like maybe like non-denominationals and stuff like that, and seeing if they actually do Advent. Because I mean, the Methodists definitely do, but they don't. Um, I guess they don't focus on it as much as they used to. In my opinion, not necessarily that I would know that, but in my personal life, I guess I would say that they don't cover Advent as much as they used to.
yeah. I don't think we do cover it at all. And as it was, the candles are a great representation because nobody knows what they are. Like we know what the four words are. We do not know what the order is.
Hmm.
Like you
Exactly.
go to a different church and that's a different order. Nobody. I mean, it's probably like a bit of the schisms between places. Like we just can't agree on what these four candles are and what order they're in, and
Hmm.
like which one's the pink one and which one's,
Yeah.
and can they be blue or purple candles, or do they have to be like can I have a red candle for hope, or like does it have to be pink? Like all the we get
But
these
I
nuances and it's just
see. I
really
think we're losing all that just because we're losing a little bit of traditionalism in church. as we go on. I
Right.
feel like, and that's more of like the traditionalism, I would say. But I mean, I like the structure to it, but also like if a church is not going to follow it, that's completely up to them, I guess. But I think that's one of our things where we're losing. We're just focusing on the day of Christmas. We're focusing on the presents. We're focusing on, you know, are we going to get the right thing for whoever it is? Which I mean, I'm not saying gift giving is bad because I mean I get gifts and I give gifts.
Right.
And Jesus got gifts in the story. He got gifts from the wise men, but you
Well,
know.
they didn't come on Christmas. That's
Yeah,
they
but
came like
they got gifts.
they came as long as 2 years later. So
It's
like, who, who knows, man?
we can skip the history lesson for
Oh.
that.
No, there's a lot. Like it's such an uncontested like time of year because my favorite. So I'm gonna go on a little history tangent just because I wanna let people have people think about this a little bit. Like the star was put in the sky when Jesus was born. Therefore, the wise men could not have left until that he was born because the star would not have appeared until then. So like just think about that. Like they were not there.
But it's good for
Continue.
a children's story.
Yeah. Which yeah, I mean that's another thing. I think we're kind of commercializing Christmas. Obviously, the gift giving, like this is the season where everyone's like, "Oh, we have Black Friday sales. We have supporting small business Saturday is fine." Like that one's a good. That I like that one. I like that one. But like we
Yeah.
have Cyber Monday and like all these sales are going on because you're supposed to be buying gifts. Well, I was at least when I was growing up, it was like you went out Black Friday to buy gifts for Christmas and you take
Hmm.
your mother to go buy something for herself and say it's for your dad and get away with it because they both kind of like but no, that was like part of it. You went out and did shopping and you had to buy gifts and we always have this gift giving season. I just imagine like I can't imagine a Christmas without getting gifts just because that's what we expect. I'd
Hmm.
be curious to see like how do I want to know what people think about doing Christmas without gifts at all.
Hmm. Yeah, we have this thing in our family now that like once you get married, you don't get presents anymore from us. I don't.
Wow.
It's not like it's just because like it can get expensive. I mean, but uh, we just you know we've turned ours into like more of like we're just thankful. I mean, it's more of like a continuation of Thanksgiving. We still
Mm,
give gifts and everything like that, but I still think we sit down and we're just thankful that everyone can get together.
yeah. I kind of like the because we shifted. A lot of stuff has been changing in my family, and it's kind of hard to navigate. But like we've been doing some changes, and so one of the changes we made is like we're only allowed to get 5 gifts. We're only allowed to buy for one person, and we like randomly get a name that we have to buy for. But
Yeah.
I like that idea in the sense like I don't like the idea in the sense that I don't get to buy for everybody, but you can still like put like little stocking stuffs in people's
Mhm.
stockings if you want to. But the good part about it is like you are intentional about you only allow a limit of so much money for 5 gifts, and it has to be 5 gifts. So you have to think about okay, what 5 gifts am I doing? How am I gonna create
Like a dirty
like
Santa almost.
yeah, kind of. But you kind of got to
Mhm.
create your own story. It's like a storyline that you're creating with your presents, and you're thinking about, okay, well, which ones do I? How do I get these into 5 gifts, and what does that look like, and how is this going to be meaningful for the other person? I think that's a really cool way to do it. It's still commercialized because you're still buying gifts, and that's not the reason for
Mhm.
Christmas. But I think we're at the point. Oh, I'm gonna get shot for saying this. We're at the point where I don't think we can go back from the commercialism. Like I feel like Christmas is just too enticed with with commerce. Like we have to be doing the gift
Mhm.
buying and that kind of stuff during the season. And I mean that's not what it's about, but I mean, everyone's like Jesus is the gift, so I guess we're getting a gift. So you know,
Yeah.
passing it
We
on is
do this.
good.
We have
But
this sign at our church. It's really bad. Well, I think it's bad just because the wording is terrible. In my opinion. I mean, if my people are listening from my church, don't even listen to me. But
what's the wording?
uh, it's it's a boy. That's what it says, and then it says, "Come to United Methodist." I'm like, you put that sign up, it's gonna look like you have a baby,
Yeah,
and it's
I mean, well,
coming. And I mean, I know they are saying that because Jesus came as a baby, but we had someone in our church that like had that up, and people thought that they were having a new kid, like one of their kids was having a baby, and I was like, oh my god,
I guess that makes sense. Yeah.
yeah. So I was like, it's just funny to see like that, the way we tried to, uh, you know, uh, get people to come to church because of that sign,
Mhm.
advertise.
Yeah.
But I think churches I would say sometimes churches sit in a weird limbo in Christmas because they're like, you know, do we want to say that the giving and like the commercialism is bad, or do we want to kind of like, welcome it as like, it's, helping make Christmas bigger, I guess.
Well, in my interpretation, from a theological standpoint, is if you're going to, if the commercialism is going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
so you might as well embrace it and put your little Christianity spin on it. So it's like, oh, we're gonna give gifts to people who can't afford to buy gifts for this season
Exactly.
because we want them to have presents. We're gonna get gifts for people who can't buy gifts because they don't have money or they're homeless or they are incarcerated and they can't buy gifts. Like we can do many things to help those kinds of people who, unlike us, normal folks who are going to church, probably have some money to buy a good sized Christmas gift for our kids and our families. So if we
I had a
change the
friend that did
idea,
that.
it works.
I had a friend that when I was younger, he would do that. He said that, instead of getting, I mean, and I felt bad for him just because I was a little kid and I was getting these gifts and I was like, "You're not getting the coolest new video game and all this stuff." And he was like, "No." And then he said, "My family, we give gifts, or we give gifts or cook food or do something good for, someone that is less fortunate, and that's their way of giving a gift to someone else."
Mm.
And I think, in my church they've always talked about like, you know we are we try to be more generous than we are receiving, and as Christians, and I completely agree that like, you know that can be a great way to let the commercialized part of church, shine, and say, hey, we're going to get all these gifts for all these great people. And
Mm.
I used to, that is the easiest way, and I will say this, it is the easiest way to get people to come to church is when you have done something good for them.
Yep. Mm.
I
I
mean, we've
mean,
talked about in our last podcast, like, good and bad and stuff like that. Sometimes you got to give something good to someone who has had the roughest, year of their life, you know, and then they might, see what this God thing is or this Jesus thing is, they might see who he is. And so
mm,
that's why I think that is a good way to change the narrative there, as I would say.
I mean, you got to think about part of our command is it being servants. We're not in the business to accrue a bunch of money or oversee a bunch of things. We're here to be providers of services. And part of that is doing those things like running food drives or giving out food, making meals, sending people Christmas dinners, buying people gifts for the holiday season. But you don't even have to do it just this time of year. Like it should be something we're doing all the time. I mean, if you're waiting for Christmas
Hmm.
to help other people, you're not doing it right either. Like you got to be doing it
Hmm.
continually. It's not something
Well, as
that
I
just
say, you got to give
stops.
the gift. you got to give the gift for the right reason. Like it can't be to uh make yourself look better.
Right.
I've had people that like, will give a bunch of money and then they're like, they want their name on a building and I'm like, you didn't give the money for the right reason. Or, it's just my church what they do and I don't know if we still do it. Um I know we do it at Thanksgiving, but I don't know if we do it at Christmas. But we do a Thanksgiving dinner and a Christmas dinner. When I was a kid, we did this. And it was on Christmas and on Thanksgiving.
Hmm.
I don't think we actually did a Thanksgiving one. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think we just did Christmas. But the reason we did that is like for people who are widowed or didn't have anybody to celebrate Christmas with, they could come and have a Christmas luncheon or Christmas dinner, and we could serve them, and that gives you a chance to serve on Christmas. As you know, as a church family, you open your church open to the community, and it was always nice because we would get people that never would ever come to our church, and never would go to church in general, but they would come to that just because they wanted. I mean, they wanted a free meal, obviously, but they wanted to have that socialize, that time to socialize with human beings, because some people that are in lesser social statuses, they may not get as much socializing time as maybe me or you,
Yeah.
but it helped them, have a that was their gift for Christmas, as I say. We didn't even have to like buy them some big gift or anything like that. We just, had a dinner with them and were able to sit down and have a good time. And that's why, in my family, when I said that, like, we are just thankful that, we get together. We are thankful that we get together because we have busy lives because, we
Hmm.
have to make Christmas so busy. And I think that's what, in my family, the reason we like celebrate Christmas and Thanksgiving and Easter so
Hmm.
big, because, that's our time to get together.
Yeah. I mean, it's part of the reason like I'm not going home this year because I know that if I went home, most likely, I was assuming when I was, it's changed now, but I can't change my mind. It's too late to change it. It's Christmas Eve. I can't go home. Um, but like I was assuming like I was gonna be spending Christmas by myself. Like we had new plans going on and everybody was doing something different and there was nobody here to like I would just be going home to sit in the house by myself. Like I don't need to go home to sit in the house by myself. That's not what I want to be doing. And I think we put a lot of pressure on the season to be with people that we generally, have connection with, and some might dare say love. Like, we want to spend time with our loved ones during the season, and it's hard. Like what you were saying, like those people who don't have that. Like I kind of was in that boat this year. Like I wasn't sure I was gonna have that. You don't. What you gotta offer something for those people who honestly they need the socialization and just not being alone on the day more than anything.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that's why, like, when we celebrate Christmas, um, as a church, I feel like, you know, the way I feel like, and this is what I was kind of going with like, that we're busy. I think Christmas has turned into a very selfish holiday. We're
Mm-hmm.
all worried about like what, how is my Christmas gonna look? Not how is, my whole church's Christmas gonna look. And so, like, I think that, as a church, if we can, worry about, celebrating together, Jesus's birth, not like, oh, I got to make sure I'm there on Christmas because it's for me.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's why I love that we do that Christmas dinner, because we're, putting away our selfish desires of, being home. I hated it on Christmas usually because I was like, I don't get to play with my presents. I don't get to play my new video game I got. But then as I got older, I was like, well, now I get a chance to like help somebody else have their dream Christmas. Um, I think it's okay for them to be selfish because they don't have the liberties as we have to not be selfish, as I would say. Um, I think as you grow with God, you have to become less selfish. That's just how it
Hmm.
works. Um, and you have to make it more about others. I said this in a sermon the other day. Um, they're saying older people say this all the time. And sometimes younger people, I don't know. A lot of them are like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna go to heaven soon." Jesus is coming back and all that stuff. And I'm like, as a Christian, I want to make sure everyone's there. So that's why I'm like, I want to make sure everybody has a chance to get the same kind of Christmas, the excitement of Christmas as some of us have had when we were younger.
That's a really good transition into what we'll be talking about in a couple weeks with salvation, and
Mm-hmm.
what causes you to be saved. But um, we have another question that we're looking at here, and it's if we're why are we celebrating if we're celebrating the wrong things? And
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, it's like it's it goes back to your tradition statement because we're so entrenched in this idea of this is something that we do every year. This is something that we have to do every year. And also the reason in my mind is like why people feel like they have to have socialization on Christmas because it's what we have been told for our entire lives, what past generations have been telling us, what they've been told. It just keeps getting passed down that this is like, oh, this is an important day that you have to have these things on it. You have to be doing these things. What does it look like if it's different? What do we do if we change it? Like I go back to the question, what does Christmas look like to you if you don't have presents? Are you still achieving a holiday, a celebration without the gifts, or do you have to have that? Are you in that sphere of commercialism, or do you need the time to connect with God?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've kind of already said it. If it's all about the gifts, if it's all about the selfishness, if it's about what is my Christmas about, then you're missing the point. Um, you know, it says that Jesus is the light of the world. So why can't we be the light of the world? Through Jesus. To others. Um, and so I think that's why a lot of times when pastors preach on Sundays, like Christmas Sundays, they'll talk about when they talk about the Jesus story, they'll talk about the light of the world coming, and they'll be like we we're getting ready for Easter. I mean, my pastor right now, his big saying is he says we're Easter people living in a Good Friday world,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that he's got a very good point there. That you know most people just think about Easter. They just think about Jesus' death, and they think his resurrection, and they think that's the big thing in Christianity. And a lot of people would say, why do we even celebrate Christmas? Because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that every story has to have a beginning.
Right.
And we're not saying that Jesus's birth is the beginning of any everything, but it's the beginning of the story that we celebrate in Easter. And so I would say if you forget about the reason we celebrate it, then you're buying into that selfishness of the commercialism of Christmas. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm not going to get gifts this year. I'm not saying that Matthew's not going to get gifts this year. That would be very, hypocritical for us to say that we are not going to get gifts this year. But um, I just feel like if we can, remember that um, it's, I had talked to Matthew a couple weeks ago when we were talking about what we were going to talk about for this episode. And I said, what if we just say, why even celebrate, Jesus's birth? Why does it even matter? Easter is the only one that, the only thing that matters. And then I had a conversation with my dad and I said, we were talking about, maybe doing this for our podcast. And he was like, you know, it's really just the beginning of the story. I mean, everybody. I mean, when you read a book, you have to go through the first couple pages to figure out what's happening. Um, and so I think it can be a beginning or a new start for some people.
Right. It's
Um,
also a reminder. Like I treat it every year as a reminder. It's like, okay, this is because Easter is so close to Christmas time. Like on
mhm,
Christmas, like they're 3-4 months away. Like you have that time period to be like, okay, well, we're gonna really concentrate on what Jesus is doing in his ministry and in his life for that really structured period of time, and then we get to the like we're not gonna cover everything. Like there's
mhm,
30 something years in there. We're not gonna cover everything, but we can at least okay, let's focus on Jesus and focus on what Jesus' teaching was trying to help us get. Because if we are Christians, like we still believe in the Hebrew scriptures and, or as some people would say, Old Testament
mhm.
readings, but Jesus added something to those readings and an interpretation that allows us to access it, I think, a little bit better.
Mhm.
And part of the reason why we started following what Christ was teaching because it's just his own little interpretation and way forward that has created a now a new section of the church of God's people, and we get to experience that through Jesus's life. And as you said, you have to start somewhere. Like, I mean, Jesus could have come fully grown on like on a
A
cloud or
random
something,
Tuesday, yeah.
on a random Tuesday at like
Yeah.
4:25 p.m. Like he could have come then, but he also could have shown up as the rest of us do. And I think that's part of making Jesus human for us is we have to see Jesus come into the world as a baby like we come into the world, or you don't connect with Jesus on that level that you do now because he is ultimately human and divine at the same time. If he comes in just as a grown man, he's just divine at that point. He doesn't have the human. He might have the human appearance, but he doesn't have the elements
Well,
that
I think there would have
made
been too
him
much
human.
fear too.
Right.
I think another reason, he came in as a baby is to not make it, as fearful, like not as like a destructive God. Because, if he came in just like poofed right into the world, that would be so like shocking to people and they would be like, scared. But, the fact that he just came as a baby and then he had to work him, you know, people just didn't start following Jesus right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
He had to talk to get people to listen to him. And so like the fact that, he came in and actually had to work, I mean, he, basically grew up as a carpenter, so like he he had to still live that human life. And so I I mean, to remember, I mean, for Easter, we celebrate that Easter's so big in Christianity, so big. I in my opinion, it's way bigger than Christmas, but I still think we can't forget Christmas because there has to be a beginning.
Yeah, because if you don't have Christmas, Jesus never came.
Mm-hmm.
He never came to the world, and then the Easter doesn't happen. So you have to have this before you get to Easter, and I think that's why it's really important. I really like the time that 3 or 4 month period because it's okay. Jesus came, and now we get to see Jesus actually doing what the prophecy was, what the prophets were telling us. He's coming
Mm-hmm.
to save us from our sin, and that can happen. God can do whatever God wants to do because God is omnipotent and can do whatever God wants to do, but it doesn't happen in the way that we would understand it
Mm-hmm.
as humans unless it follows the sequence like it has.
Well, and even like in our last episode, we kind of and I did a sermon on it actually about a week ago. I talked about Job, and I'm not talking specifically about Job himself. I'm talking about more when God shows Job like all the the universe, how it happens, and all the things God has to do to keep the world going, and like the fact that he cannot comprehend it. And I just think it's crazy that like he had all that to do, but he still like made the time to make, you know, the whole Jesus story happen. He gave us some way to understand his word more than just, writing a book and having us read it and, worshiping a book. Because we don't worship just, the Bible. You know what I'm saying? We worshiped a person that lived and existed, um, that was the Son of God. That's what I would say. So
I
I
think
would I would just say that Christmas, it's a story.
yeah. Well, it's also like we don't have as good of access to God if we don't have Jesus, because we have that figure that we can connect to that allows us a deeper connection with God than like, okay, we're just gonna trust that this everything is real, but we have somebody that we actually have all these accounts of that did all these things that we can connect to God through. And it's a way of showing us how to live our lives too, because that's what Jesus was teaching.
Well, I kind of wanted you to kind of get our viewers ready for what is to come within the next year. So
So
why don't you just let them know?
we've obviously been teasing this salvation episode for a while. That is going to be coming up. It could be the next one. I think that's what we have it scheduled as now, but obviously something else could happen with it, and we could decide that something else is more pressing to us, or we come up with a different idea that we want to talk about. But salvation is on our list of things to do. It's a really fun conversation. It's probably going to be more than one episode, at least if Luke lets me talk about it, because
He can talk as much as he wants.
there's so much with salvation. Because I took a whole class on salvation and what that means, just going through the different people. So expect to be a little bit tested here, and expect to have your brain working, because part of your faith is not just it being stagnant and just believing. It's part of learning about it deeper and understanding it better. So we hope that that's what we're providing for you here, and that this is challenging your faith, not in ways that are like, well, it's wrong and I don't want to do this anymore, but like, oh, I haven't thought about it this way, and how does that affect what I actually believe, and maybe I'm going to change my mind, or maybe I have a new insight now because of it.
I also wanted to. We're also going to try to talk about some the way music has changed the church. That was one of our other topics we had talked about. And that one, um, we talked about maybe having a guest, but also I studied music in college, so like I can definitely talk about that a lot. But that would be we wanted to talk about that topic. And then we had talked about maybe in the future having some guests or something like that, but we don't know yet. We want to make sure that you guys know we're the hosts, and podcast is our little baby. But uh, we there if there's any other like topics you'd want us to talk about, because I mean, I think one thing that we are probably going to approach maybe this with coming in within this next year is talking about like youth ministry and talking about different types of children's ministry, because I have a dream of being a part-time youth pastor, or hope maybe full-time youth pastor at some point. And so I really care about youth ministry.
And that's what my training is, and so I'm helpful
Yeah,
in that regard.
and so we're probably going to try to talk about some not, I wouldn't say it's going to be like an educational thing, like we're not going to say this is the way you get youth, but we're going to hopefully maybe like try to um unpack what it is, what youth ministry is, and in the 20th century, because it's not 21st century, because it's not what it used to be. It's not, as Matthew would say, it's not you know throwing them down the hall in another room.
It's not the 1950s.
Yeah.
We can move on.
So I mean, we would love for you guys to comment and stuff like that, and just say what you want us to talk about, but also like tell us, don't tell us your church. Obviously, you don't have to tell us exactly where you live or whatever, but like tell us how
Please don't.
your youth ministries are doing, like what are your kind of things that you do, because I mean I'd like to hear what people are doing because it might help. We may be able to start a conversation and help people with their youth ministries. I think a good way to help your youth or to help your children's ministry is to communicate with others, see what's working out.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
We don't have to reinvent the wheel, as they would say.
yeah,
If we can
exactly.
just help each other, you know, it it doesn't matter that they're not coming to your church. It matters that they're going to a church.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you can help somebody else, that's a good practice, and it's also part of your gifts that you are giving this season. Boom! I tied it back into Christmas. Let's go.
um, but we just hope that you guys are gonna have a good Christmas this year, and that you are, you know, hopefully giving a gift to someone else. That you are, um, making it not about you, making it about Jesus, and making it about, allowing other people to see the powers in work and seeing the light of Jesus shine through this season.
I would say don't give a gift, be a gift to somebody else.
Hmm.
To give of yourself so you can be that for someone. And that's all I. That's a good note to leave it on. So if we're gonna leave it there, we thank you
Okay.
guys for hanging out with us for the last hour or so. If it's been an hour, it might be a shorter episode, but you have stuff to do, right? As we've been talking, right? It's Christmas.
Hmm.
You're busy. This is a lot of
Yeah, we're
time.
making this a short episode for your
Shorter
busy
episodes for
schedule.
your busy schedule. We hear your comments. So, and speaking of comments, please leave them. You can leave them in the YouTube section. There's a comment section below the video, so please go down there and let us know your thoughts. Luke offered a bunch of questions about like what you want to hear, your youth ministry program. So answer anything. You can always like chat with us there. We would love to hear about it. There's also a Q&A section on Spotify, so there will be a question that we'll have put in there. You can answer that. You can answer other things that we've talked about. Please feel free to connect with us there. And you can also connect with us on Twitter if you want to just send us a tweet. Hey, what about this? I was thinking about this. Episode 5 inspired me to give this thing to somebody with a picture of what we did. That'd be kind of cool. I'd love to see those kinds of things. So would appreciate
Tell
you
us how your
guys doing
churches
that.
are going. Tell us what your problems in your church are. You don't have to like say like, "Oh, I hate this person in our church," because we don't hate people, but just say like, we have this many people coming to church. Like, how can we fix that? Like,
Yeah.
how? Well, I'm not saying we're the most knowledgeable people on it that we're gonna be able to fix all your problems. But we want to at least try to help. I mean, we're here to uh, try to make Christianity bigger than it is. We're trying to solve that age old problem where people are saying, Christianity's always dying. We want to change that and say it's booming, and that we can't get people, we can't get enough chairs for the people coming in church.
And ultimately, this podcast is a conversation, not just between me and Luke, but a conversation between us and you as well. So we appreciate your feedback and your comments. I think we've said enough here. So unless you have anything else pressing you want to say, I'll give you a chance.
It's Merry Christmas, and
There.
hopefully you have a good New Year too.